Adelante que
Muy buenas tardes, good afternoon. I am Janitzi Velez with Hispanic Federation Florida and Southeast. I'm the director for the state Florida, and it's my privilege to host and moderate this event today. Thank you for being part of the Florida Breakout session of the Hispanic Federation Educational Summit, and we welcome you. Thank you for joining us on this important discussion and to have a portion of the summit to make questions about the state of Florida education status. If you have questions, we will appreciate if you can send them through the chat as we have limited time. However, at the end of our presentations and conversations with our speakers, we will be able to call your name and you can ask your question. Please join me to welcome our three panelists for today. Dr. Rosa Castro Fanworm, she is a teacher, professor, and a school board member for the Miami-Dade County Public School, and is currently a co-chair of the Government of Media Relations Committee for LULAC, Florida. Dr. Rosa Castro is an expert on bilingual education for Latino students. She has written numerous writings, handbooks, and curriculums about education Spanish-speaking Hispanics. She also has contributed to several books, including Bilingual Education for Latino Students and Beyond Rhetoric on Urban Multicultural Education. Also, we have Joanna Lopez. She's the Orange County School Board member. Ms. Elizabeth West.
Sorry. Hi, how are you?
Welcome, Ms. Joanna.
Thank you.
She is actually representing as the first Latina Puerto Riqueña joining this school committee, and she's representing District 2 on Orange County School Board since 2018. After her campaign was fully run by the current and former OCPS students, Lopez was an impressive record of serving the community, being the founder of Familias Presentes, Estudiantes Excelentes, an online forum directed to making the parents aware of different educational issues and opportunities. As well, Maestros Puertorriqueños en Acción is another initiative of her work and passion commitment with the community. She is currently the Executive Director of Voces Unidas por la Educación, a Latinx coalition that advocates for public education. Also, please join me to welcome Joshua Torres. He's a faculty member of Ana G. Mendez University. As a social co-worker professor in the undergraduate program, he has been working very closely with the community. Additionally, Professor Torres is an advisory board member for the LGBTQ community organization Del Ambiente. He's also a member of the Council of Social Work Education, Council on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity and Expression. Thank you, panelists, for taking time of your precious time to share your expertise and to discuss with us and all the participants of this break session one of the main current challenges for our Hispanic community, which is the state of education equity in Florida. So I will ask you, if you are not speaking, please stay on mute, and then you will be asked to unmute yourself when it's your turn to speak. Let's begin our conversation with Dr. Castro Fanworm. Doctor, what aspect of the Hispanic education will you be talking about today, and why this subject is so important and relevant in terms of the education for the Latino community in the state of Florida?
Thank you, Yanitzi. It's a pleasure to be here. My focus is going to be on English language learners and distance learning. In other words, English language learners who are participating in virtual education. And that's an important topic because it may very well be a permanent part of our future in education. In Florida, we have almost 300,000 English language learners. 80% of them are Hispanic, 10% are Black, and both of these communities, Hispanic and Black, are sorely afflicted by the coronavirus. That's the context that we're talking about. They're also sorely afflicted by the economic consequences of the coronavirus. The students are split into two groups. One group is going to brick and mortar schools, face-to-face education. The other is receiving remote education, distance learning of one sort or another. We know that face-to-face is better, higher quality education. But we also know that our children need to be protected. They need a safe haven. And if their parents choose it, virtual learning is the safe haven where they can continue their education. The economy in Florida, like that in most parts of the country, is in a state of pandemic-induced constriction. The Revenue Estimating Conference predicted a $2 billion shortfall in the state budget for 21-22. Unemployment as of June 2020 was 10.4%. That's 1 million unemployed persons. All state and local government agencies are anticipating enormous budget cuts in the coming months.
I have a question. So we hear about the economic, like you mentioned, and this is a huge impact for our students. But I guess that there is other challenges specifically for the English learners and virtual learning, students. What should be those questions? What should be the questions that the advocate should address in relation to these two issues?
I think there are 5 fundamental questions. And these questions I'll either put in the chat later or send to Yanitsi to distribute after the conference. In other words, you don't have to take notes. The first of the 5 questions: how will we ensure that language is not a barrier for students in the virtual learning setting? And by that, we really mean, what are the eligibility requirements for participating in remote learning programs? In Florida, for example, we have a state, Florida Virtual School, and this institution, it's its own school district. For full-time students, they have a requirement that the students have passed the state assessments. And in Florida, we're not one of the 31 states that have native language assessment. So this represents a barrier both to eligibility for enrollment in a virtual school and a barrier to graduation, which is why in Florida, English language learners are the subgroup with the lowest graduation rate. The second question: do all Florida students have a real option for remote learning? And the backstory there is that every district has set up its own district learning delivery system, and it's in use right now this semester. But we do not know if there's funding available for the future, which means if the districts close up their delivery system, what's left? What's left is the Florida State Virtual School, which doesn't let everybody in. So this is an important question. And this question is important not only to Florida advocates, but possibly to those in other states also. The third question: will English learners have priority for returning to face-to-face brick-and-mortar learning settings while still preserving the right of their parents to select which setting they want for their children? Number 4, do English learners in remote learning settings receive appropriate language and academic support? I've been looking through the reopening plans from every Florida school district. I've gotten about halfway through. And so far, the only district whose plan guarantees that students both in remote and in face-to-face settings will be able to continue their dual language programming is Broward County. And that's something to celebrate for Broward County and be concerned about in every other district. It may be that other districts are doing it and they just didn't put it in the plan, but we don't know unless we ask. And finally, the fifth question I'm sorry. I just asked if they'd have opportunities to continue with dual language, and I skipped the fourth question, which is, will they receive appropriate language and academic support in their virtual settings? Most of the plans that I read had a lot of emphasis on teaching English, which is good. But most of the plans that I read had almost no emphasis on teaching academic content to English learners, which is not good. So that's another question that we need to investigate.
You mentioned dual language education, and here in the Central Florida, we know that it's critical for our students, mostly in the whole state, right? But there are pockets, different areas that are really in dire need of dual language education. Where we can find more about it, and why is this so important for our community?
Let me give you a few reasons why dual language is important. In the first place, it is a model that permits the participants to finish elementary school sequence of classes and end up bilingual and biliterate. That in itself is a fantastic boon that we get from enrolling our children in a dual language program. The second is that studies across the country have indicated that students in dual language programs outperform their peers not in a dual language program, so that it is a powerful way of teaching them not only English, but also the other content areas. And finally, there are several studies, but three in particular, that demonstrate that the only way to eliminate the achievement gap for English learners is through a dual language program. Now, I'm going to put in chat or send to you, and see one way or another you'll get it, a list of 5 references. I'll just mention one, the Center for Applied Linguistics. That's cal.org. It has a wealth of information on every aspect of language learning and a specific page on dual language, which in itself gives you references to other places to read up on it. So it's a good one-stop shopping place. cal.org, the Center for Applied Linguistics.
Thank you so much. And we have Freddy Agrait, who is our co-host for this event, and he is actually going to put all that information on the chat. But let's continue with you, Rosa, for a couple more questions, because I think that this is so essential. What challenges affect English learners that their parents and their teachers participating in the pandemic induced by distance learning? What are those daily challenges that really affecting our students, and how we can really not only comment about it, but work to overcome those challenges?
Let me address each group one at a time, starting with the students. For students, the shorthand is access to opportunity. And this is particularly dramatic, the absence of opportunity, when you think about devices and connectivity to the internet. There is a survey of instructional personnel working with ESOL students, ELLs. It's in its beginning stages. We've only gotten a few returns so far. But of those returns, 5 out of 10, that's 5 representatives out of 10 district representatives, said that they had serious concerns about their students' access to devices. We're talking specifically about English learners. Even more startling, 9 out of the 10 expressed concern about connectivity for their English learners. Mm-hmm. And then, on top of all that, and here we don't know how many English learners are involved, Thousands of students across the state have just disappeared. They were expected to enroll in the fall, but they haven't shown up. Nobody knows where they are. I heard that a trickle had been found going back into the schools in Duval. I haven't heard anything about the rest. I don't know of a massive child find going on. But there are thousands of children. They should have been back in school, either remotely or in person in the fall, and nobody knows where they are. Now that is serious, high-level denial of access to opportunity. Now the parents, particularly in remote learning settings, we don't just need family engagement. We need parent partnership. And the blockage to effective parent partnership, despite the best efforts of our bilingual teachers and our bilingual paraprofessionals, is still the same thing: communication and connectivity. In other words, when I say communication, I really mean translation and interpretation. In many places, it is just not available, or not available in enough languages, or not available at enough time during the day so that the parent and the school person can get together at a mutually convenient time. In addition, and this is of great concern, many districts have reported that their parent leadership councils have not met since school closed in March of the last semester. The parent leadership councils are the group established by State Board of Education rule. Every district has one. They are to be consulted in the development of the English language learner plan that's turned into the state every year. It's an important group and an important mechanism to help school staff connect with the community. And yet, in many districts, they have not met since March of last semester. Now, the teachers. Teachers have expressed great concern about the lack of preparation for the virtual platform from many districts. There are 4 out of 10 of the respondents from the districts said they felt well prepared or very well prepared. 4 out of 10. That means the other 6 are just getting by or in desperate shape. And that is a function of 2 things. One is funding, and the other is the overwhelming nature of trying to respond to the coronavirus. I'm sure nobody is deliberately denying professional development to our teachers, but it is something that we need to keep reminding our school officials about so that something happens. I'm going to get to solutions in just a minute, Yanitzi. I didn't forget that you mentioned that. The other problem with affecting teachers is layoffs. They've already started laying off teachers in some parts of the state. And to date, I have not heard one superintendent say that positions related to English language learners would be protected. We want to hear that. We want to ask our school board members and our superintendents to make that statement and make it true, that we will protect the positions of the teachers working with vulnerable students. I haven't heard it yet so far. To add to the problem, there's been a teacher exodus for other reasons besides the layoff. As far back as June, before the pandemic, there were 2,440 vacant teaching positions. It's worse now. And substitutes are even scarcer. Every district seems to be desperate to find substitutes. And if they find them, they can hire them with credentials no higher than a high school diploma or a GED. In other words, that's the minimum qualification. Each district sets its own requirements, but that's what the state said is the minimum. Now, that obviously affects the quality of our education.
Rosa, I know that there is a great deal of interest on this topic in particular, and we want to come back to you, but just because of the sake of the time, we need to move forward with our panelists. So stay tuned, Rosa, because we might get back to you on those policy solutions and other options, because we definitely understand the pressing matter, specifically for our students, teachers, and parents during the pandemic. So, with that said, Joanna, welcome again, and let's talk about education reforms, right? We have seen how our community have been facing challenges after challenges, specifically for those immigrants that that comes from Central America, and also for those who came from the island after Hurricane Maria. And we can talk about all those, but what educational reforms were created during the pandemic in particular to grant Latinx students the right to equal education in Orange County?
No, thank you for asking the question, because I was trying also to find more information about any type of reform at a state level as well, so I can be, more informed. And the response from the district is that we do not have at a state level any reform directly for our Latinx community, and I want to make clear on that one. At a local level, it's different. At a local level, we make a lot of changes in the way we communicate our information, because during the pandemic, it's very important to translate in a daily basis, because it's something that is going to, every decision is going to affect not only our Latinx community, but everybody. So we communicate the plan, and we communicate the options. We communicate in Spanish, in Creole, and in Portuguese, and sometimes in Vietnamese as well. Different information, updated information in a daily basis. Let's say the options, when we were working on the options, to have that survey to choose which options the parent decide to have, maybe distance learning, maybe face-to-face, because we want to have, the feedback from our community. So we send that information to the parents and also to the teachers. We also have a translation on the website. We also make calls in both languages, in Spanish and English. And we also have translations during school board meetings. If we have parents that are going to they're going to make calls, or maybe go to the school board meetings, they call ahead of time, and we find somebody who will make those translations. I think that the translations are very important, because we are living in a crisis, and it's going to affect everybody. And I also, through Familias Presentes, also, I'm thinking in Spanish and English at the same time. That's very common in me.
Dual language.
My native language is Spanish. I'm Puerto Rican from the island, from Aguadilla, Puerto Rico to Orlando, Florida. So I know the struggle of my community, of my English language learners as well. So I also have a group called Familias Presentes, Estudiantes Excelentes, where I speak Spanish all the time, because I saw a lot of press conferences from the Department of Education, but I did not see at a state level any Spanish translation, any Spanish information, and I think that my community needs to know. So I take the time, in the middle of my dining room with the dog, and everybody sometimes, oh my God, but it was so important to let them know what it was happening every day, because we were also facing the executive order that was taking away our power as a school board member to decide what was better for our students. For example, if we believe that the school should stay closed, the Department of Education can penalize us by taking away funds, because it's not the same way having a distance learning student than having them face to face. So they were trying to make us make some decisions that will be more empowering the face-to-face education. So at a school, at a local level, we decided to assign a medical advisory committee. So we can say the medical advisory committee is saying that based on the data of the positive cases in Central Florida, we can make this choice. So at the end, when we have the vote as a school board member, myself and another fellow school board members decided not to choose to open schools, but the majority of my school board members decided to open the schools, even with the medical advisory committee recommended not to open middle school and high school at the same time, because we were waiting to see how it's going to go with the elementary school. But thank Lord, everything went good. The parents felt safe. So now we have the protocol to be followed at a local level, and we have the plan, and we provide that plan, and we make different maps, thinking maps, so the parents can understand, because the catalog was very, it was in detail by staff members, by teachers, by parents. It's a lot of information. So we decided to make a summary in a very friendly way, so they understand the importance of having the mask, the distance learning, how transportation is gonna be look like. So I also did a town hall, but a town hall in English one day, the same day, in 1 hour and a half in English. And then, because I don't believe a lot in having town halls in English and Spanish, I think that our Latinx community deserves the same space. So I did the hour and a half for the English speaking, and then hour and a half for our Spanish speaking as well. So we talk about transportation, we talk about distance, social distance, why, how, how long, because at a state level, and now, and we have to talk about this because now that we are in phase number 3, in phase number 3 is not emphasizing the distance, the social distancing. And for me, it's alarming, because when we were trying to see students every day in the school system, because people were trying to compare Home Depot or maybe Publix or Walmart with the school system. You don't go to Home Depot every day, 5 days a day, 7 hours a day. So we have to make sure that the distance, we have to practice distance. We have to wear the mask, and the mask needs certain characteristics, and we have to let them know how it looks like. So the medical advisory committee, they have meetings on Wednesday. So we decided, what information are we going to provide, the arrangements on the code of conduct, because now the code of conduct is going to look different because of the pandemic. So we have to make changes in policies. We have to make changes in this code of conduct, because obviously we're not going to say that if you don't wear the mask, you're gonna be expelled, but you cannot be in school if you cannot wear a mask. And we have certain situations that we have students that cannot wear the mask, and that is something that is also, something very, very because we have to think about our ESC students. Not every student can wear a mask. So we have to make arrangements in what can we provide to them, so if they have to go to school, so we have to provide another way to make them included and provided, the class that they need and the environment that they need to save their life, but also take care of the people that are surrounding them. I also want to talk about, I don't know how much time I have, but I want to talk about the over-testing. I think that is very important, because the Florida standardized test is not fair for our English language learners. I believe that if we waive that the last year, we should waive that test again. And I even believe that we can get rid of it because I think it's a filter for our student to go to for post-secondary education. So I think that we should be more effective and we can even narrow the achievement gap. I'm so glad that we have Rosa here. I'm so honored to be with her today, because if we're focused on a test, because it's too much pressure to our teachers and to our parents and to our students to be focused on the test instead of being focused on the content of the class, so our students can be more successful after high school. And, don't be stressful because if you don't pass the test, you're not going to graduate. Mm-hmm. I think it's not fair for them. I think that if they know, if they know math, why I have to give them the test in English? They know math. That's a universal language, not the numbers. So why we are not allowing them to take that test in Spanish? Because they know math. Why? I think that this is something that is going to benefit not only our Latinx students, but also everybody, the schools, everybody's going to be positively affected by this situation. I think that we can have more people prepare in our country, because this is for us as well. When we are helping an English language learner, we are helping everybody. So I think that we have to think about the native assessment, the over testing. Mm-hmm. And now that we are during the pandemic, I think that this is the time to also talk about this. We don't need more stress. We don't need more struggles, psychological struggles. And also,
and I think, Joanna, that this is a great sideway, right? And we will get back to you again. But I think this is we already had that challenge before the pandemic. And we were, as a community of Latinos, advocating for rights and the right space. I love that. Latinos should have the same right of the space and the quality of the services and access in absolutely everything, and mostly in education for our children to ensure their future, right? And just really put down those barriers. It's time for these children who have struggled, who has, as a family, have been impacted in so many ways. But also, I think that you touch base on, and this is the transition that I wanted to do, after high school, right? Because if you have been for 12 years, let's put it that way, let's last 4 years of high school, struggling with the language, struggling with the system, I don't know how many of them are really going to be so excited to go to the university when really everything is going to be in English. So I think the transition and the learning, it has to go hand to hand. But also we see how some racial equality, it's also part of the problem that our students are facing. And with that, if I may, Joanna, for a second, I wanted to transition with Joshua, who actually it's a professor at Anna G. Menda University, and is a social service worker where it's a professional working with not only students, but also in the social service field. And Joshua, I really would like you to talk about, specifically just for continue the topic around COVID-19. How is it that, we see nationally Latino students enrollment and degree competition continues to increase. However, different patterns emerge within each state. In Florida, as we have talking with Rosa and Joanna, is home for one of the largest Latino population in the state, and yet the Florida graduate from 2 years institution at a rate higher than Latinos nationally. However, Florida lacks in Latinos degree competition and overall degree attainment. And we're talking about social impact, economic impact, language barrier, and many other challenges. But now, on the face of COVID-19, how does racial discrimination negatively impact Hispanic students pursuing higher education in these times?
Well, I just wanted, before I begin, I wanted to thank you for having me here today. And it's a privilege to be here with Dr. Castro and with school board member Joanna Lopez. So yes, we are in hard times. Our students at the college level are also confronting difficult moments, right? And the rhetoric that we continue to hear is that we're all in the same boat, right? Independent of your race, your color, your language, your sexual orientation, your gender, we all have the chance of getting sick, right? And that's what we continue to hear. But when we look at the numbers and we look at who's getting sick and who's dying, and we put that into statistical information, we're learning that message is not necessarily clear, right? So research is already telling us that Black and Brown communities, right, are the communities that are more being affected by COVID-19, okay? Now, specifically, what's very interesting is that, and this is going to be a hard to swallow topic for some of us, the concept of racism, okay? And racism is real. Some of us acknowledge it. Some of us try to say that it's no longer existent. That's a chip on our shoulder. But racism is subdivided within three categories, okay? And we have what we call individual level racism, and I'm going to give you an example of that. As part of the measures to stay safe, we have to use masks, correct? You go outside, you put your mask on, you keep yourself safe, and you keep your neighbor safe. And yet, it's been reported that Black and brown people, the Latinx community and the African American community, have been racially profiled for using the same measures that other Anglo-Saxon communities might use to stay safe, right? Just because they look different, then they're not only using their mask to keep themselves safe, but they're using it to steal. They're using it to do deviant behaviors, right? So we see an expression of individual racism throughout the coronavirus epidemic. And then, of course, we have cultural racism. And cultural racism is the messages that we continue to hear from public figures or our neighbor, where, for example, during this COVID-19 pandemic, you better stay away from alcohol and drugs. And what that message is saying, and if you're less Hispanic and you don't know me and you gave me that message, what you're saying is that my culture is filled with alcoholics and with people that have substance abuse issues, right? And the Hispanic community throughout this pandemic continues to receive these types of messages. Mm-hmm. And specifically, and this is the item that I want to focus on today, is the last stage or the last type of racism, which is structural racism, right? And this is what really is affecting our Latinx community throughout this pandemic. Now, I'm going to put out a poll out there, and I just want to remind everyone that this is a safe space. And I would just want you to be very honest with your response. There's no judgment here. I'm the only one that's going to be able to see the answer. And from there, we're going to have this very interesting conversation. So I'm going to say it out loud. Should undocumented immigrants receive stimulus relief? Now, again, this is a safe space. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no judgment here, but I would just like to see your response. So I'm starting the poll. If it pops out, please vote.
And you can go down. There's going to be some polling site. It's the last to your right, and you will be able to pop there the question.
Perfect. I'm reading John Moreno's comment. That made me laugh.
Okay.
Perfect. So I see that 7 people have voted so far. I see that we have 15, but I'm just, for the reason of time, I'm going to continue. So far, the 8 people that have voted have said, yes, undocumented immigrants should receive a stimulus check. And I love your answers. And it just goes back to our personal values. And it goes back to the values of the Hispanic Federation and our commitment to our community independent of their status. Now, what I find interesting is that I had this same poll with my students. And my students are all Hispanic. They're all from the Latinx community, from different nationalities and different walks of life. And we had a very heated debate. I'm going to end this poll. We had a very heated debate because it went to no, they shouldn't. Yes, they should from, certain predicaments. Right now, the thing is that when we talk about higher education, we know that we have a certain population that is Hispanic, is Latino, belongs to the Latinx community. Mm-hmm. What we don't know is what's their status. We don't know as a higher learning institution or even in our local schools what specific situations they're going through. We do know that the majority of essential workers are built up on Hispanic, brown, and Black communities, and they have a higher risk of getting sick, right? So, not knowing their status, not knowing what they're going through, knowing that they have to provide for their families and for themselves and keeping safe, but at the same time, staying very engaged in their studies and focused on their dreams can create a burnout situation and put them in a mental health situation that is not going to help them throughout this process.
As we have seen, Joshua, right?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And what I would recommend as a possible solution is creating intergroup dialogues. Intergroup dialogues are essential, independently if we're talking about higher education or we're talking about our schools. We have to create these groups where people from different walks of life within the Hispanic community, within the Latinx community, can talk about the issues that are affecting them, right? And I say this with lots of respect. It's very easy, and I say this because I'm Puerto Rican, it's very easy for us as Puerto Ricans to take positions and to create thoughts and verbalize them because we benefit from specific privileges that other Hispanic communities do not in the United States. So our walk of life as Puerto Ricans in the United States not necessarily represents the same life experiences of other marginalized groups within our community. So it's very important to identify the intradiversity that we have in our specific academic schools and environments and communities and create these types of dialogues. These dialogues are going to develop awareness and understanding. They are going to create relationships with the institution and, of course, with our community. And that relationship is going to take us to collaborate, identify resources in the community, and act and engage to create change. When we do this, we eradicate structural racism, which is racism that is inserted within our political system, in this case, not giving relief to one of the most vulnerable communities that support and that contribute to our economy.
I think, Joshua, you had touched in such an important topic, particular because, we have seen, we're talking about how to help our students, Latinx students, to hire and be successful in higher education. And they are not only have to struggle with the decision whether they have to study or work, whether transportation, whether, there is a scholarship, whether it's, but also racial, it's real, and it's real for our community. And this is a very no partisan space. This is all about information. But just FYI, if you don't know, there's elections right a corner. So this is one of the best way to really advocate for those who are voiceless, who cannot yet go out to vote. This is one of the reasons. Education is one of the reasons why you're so passionate to serve in your community. Just put a check mark and go out to vote. So that was my cue on that. But Joshua, I think that what other solutions do you think that we should address or we could propose in 1 minute, 1 minute and a half, if you can? What solutions do you think that we should see on the table and discuss with the elected officials and other entities that could move the needle in favor of these students?
Definitely. So as I mentioned, mental health is an extreme factor that is complicating, that is impeding our students from succeeding, right? And mental health can be associated to extreme stress, to, anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to create, and this is what I would tell to those individuals that are engaging within policy formulation. We have to create policy that obligates our institutions with the necessary funds, of course, to create programs that attend our students' mental health. I know that in the schools, since the event of Park Place, different counties have moved to allocate specific funds for mental health and have social workers in their schools, and I applaud that. But specifically, there's not a mandate, there's no public policy that indicates that a higher education setting has to have it. And I don't know if it's mandatory for our public systems, but I do know that they're moving towards that, right? So we have to bring in mental health professionals, clinical social workers, mental health counselors, psychologists to come in and work with our students to alleviate and give them those techniques and resources that they need so that they can be resilient and they can continue to be empowered within their situations. I love, for example, I'm going to throw myself out there. I love Ana G. Mendez. That's where I work. Ana G. Mendez is a dual language university that teaches, a different array of programs in both languages. And we give that space to our students so that they can learn and be, awesome people in our society. But we don't have mental health services for our students.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And I think that we have less than a minute to finish, and I just want to say thank you so much for everyone who has joined us today. Thank you for the comments. Thank you, panelists, for your contribution to this conversation. There's so much that we can talk about, but it's just because of the time that we are not able to really get into dissolve all this as it should. But to be honest, this is just the beginning. This is a national educational summit. We are just addressing statewide issues. But one of the main points here is that if we want to see our students succeed, not only from K to 12, but also to seek for higher education and be successful, we need to tackle some other socials and civil rights within the education system. So we hope that you can continue to follow Hispanic Federation work, and also you can see the bios of each one of the panelists with their names on it. You just click on it and you see their background, and you can also follow them on their social platform. This is Janitzi Velez. I'm the Florida State Director, and it has been a great deal of pleasure for me to moderate this event. Rosa, thank you very much. Joshua y Joanna, muchas gracias. I need glasses at this point. But anyway, I think that if you have any question or you would like to seek more information about Florida education equity, please send an email. We will be more than happy to connect with our panelists, and more important, to continue the conversations to move forward the education system for the Latinx community in the state of Florida. Thank you. Stay there. We're going to take a picture. Let me see how I do that. We're going to do Freddy, are you there?
Yes.
Vamos a sacar una foto. Okay, say cheese. Oh, wait, no. Freddy, how we can do that? I don't want to take a selfie of me. I want to take a selfie of everyone.
Let me do a screenshot.
Okay. Okay. And what we need to do is, ustedes ven abajo, ven que hay como una camarita abajo al lado del pooling. Dice Virtual Groupie.
Janitzi, you can press disconnect. We're still live.
No, we're not. Are we? Oh, yes, we are. Let me see.
Yes.
Apparently, no, we. Okay. Well, anyways, see you guys. Thank you. Is it a countdown? Thank you so much. Take care.
Fun.
Gracias, Joanna.
Bye-bye.
Gracias, Joshua. Bye.
Gracias.